Hey everyone, welcome back to our little corner of the world. I'm Alex and I'm here with my amazing friend Sarah. Today we're going to talk about something that's super relevant for a lot of people, how to practice speaking at home. Right, Sarah?
Absolutely, Alex. I think this is a topic that hits home for so many of us. Whether you're trying to learn a new language, improve your public speaking, or just get better at expressing yourself, practicing speaking is key. And doing it from the comfort of your own home can make it a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people feel nervous about speaking in public or even in front of others, so finding ways to practice at home can really help build confidence.
Totally. So let's start by sharing some methods that have worked for us. I know you've got some great techniques, Alex. What's one of your go-to ways to practice speaking?
Well, one of my favorite things to do is to talk to myself. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it really works. I usually pick a topic I'm interested in and just start talking about it out loud. It could be anything from the latest book I've read, a movie, or even just how my day went.
That's a great idea. It's like having a conversation with yourself, right?
Exactly. It helps me organize my thoughts and practice expressing them clearly. Plus, it's a safe space to make mistakes and learn from them. You can really focus on your pronunciation, tone, and the flow of your words without any pressure.
I love that. I do something similar, but I often record myself while I'm talking. It's a bit like journaling, but verbally. I'll record myself speaking on a topic for a few minutes and then play it back to listen for any areas I can improve on.
Oh, that's a brilliant twist on it. Recording yourself adds that extra layer of feedback because you can hear how you actually sound. Sometimes we think we're being clear, but when we listen back, we might notice things we can adjust.
Exactly. It can be eye-opening to hear yourself from an outsider's perspective. You can catch those filler words like and see where you might be rushing or dragging your speech.
That's true. I've definitely caught myself using fillers when I play back recordings. It's a great way to become more conscious of your speech habits. Another thing I've found helpful is to read aloud, especially if I'm working on a new language or trying to improve my pronunciation.
Oh yes, reading aloud is fantastic. It's like practicing without the pressure of coming up with your own words. You can focus entirely on how you're saying things, which is perfect for fine-tuning pronunciation.
Exactly. And you can use all kinds of materials, books, articles, even scripts from your favorite movies or shows. I sometimes like to read out dialogues from movies because it helps with the natural flow of conversation.
That's a great point. You get to practice intonation and emotion too, which are super important in making your speech sound natural. And if you're reading something with a lot of characters, you can even practice switching between different voices or accents, if that's something you're working on.
Definitely. And speaking of accents, something else that's really helped me is shadowing. Have you tried that?
Oh, I love shadowing. It's such an effective technique. For those who might not be familiar, shadowing is where you listen to a native speaker or someone you want to emulate and then try to mimic them as closely as possible, almost like you're their echo.
Exactly. It's great for picking up the rhythm, intonation, and even the accent of the language. Plus, it forces you to really listen and pay attention to the details of how they're speaking.
And you can do it with so many types of audio: movies, podcasts, speeches, anything really. It's like having a personal coach, but you're in control of the pace and the material.
That's what I love about it too. You can pause, rewind, and replay as much as you need until you get it just right. It's also a great way to build up your speaking speed and fluency.
And for those who might be learning a new language, shadowing can be particularly helpful. You're not just practicing vocabulary or grammar in isolation. You're practicing how to put it all together in a way that sounds natural.
Definitely. And another thing that's helped me, especially with public speaking, is practicing in front of a mirror. It sounds simple, but it's really powerful.
Oh, the mirror technique. That's a classic. It's great for working on body language and facial expressions too, which are huge parts of effective communication.
Exactly. It helps you see how you come across to others. You can practice making eye contact, using gestures, and just overall how you present yourself. It's amazing how much more confident you can feel after a few sessions in front of the mirror.
Absolutely. And it's also a great way to catch any nervous habits, like fidgeting or avoiding eye contact, so you can work on those in a low-pressure setting.
For sure. And speaking of low-pressure settings, one thing I like to do is create a sort of practice environment at home. I'll pretend I'm giving a speech or having a conversation in front of an audience, even if it's just stuffed animals or an empty room.
That's so fun. I do something similar when I'm preparing for a presentation or an important conversation. It's like a dress rehearsal, and it really helps to get into the right mindset.
Exactly. It's all about getting comfortable with the act of speaking and making it feel as natural as possible. And since there's no actual audience, you can experiment and try different things without any pressure.
I think that's a really important point. Removing the pressure. When you're practicing at home, you have the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them without any judgment. It's all about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely. And one more thing I've found helpful is practicing with a friend or family member. Even if they're not working on the same thing, just having someone to listen and give feedback can be really valuable.
Definitely. And it can be a lot of fun too. You can role play different scenarios or just have a casual conversation. Sometimes I like to do this with a language exchange partner when I'm practicing a new language.
That's a great idea. It adds a layer of accountability too. When you know someone else is involved, you're more likely to stick to your practice routine.
For sure. And sometimes having someone else there can push you out of your comfort zone a bit, which is where a lot of growth happens.
Absolutely. I think that's a key takeaway. Finding ways to push yourself just a little bit each time you practice. Whether it's trying out a new technique, speaking on a more challenging topic, or just aiming to be more expressive, it all adds up over time.
Definitely. And remember, consistency is key. Even if you only have a few minutes a day to practice, that regular effort will make a big difference over time.
100%. It's all about building those habits and keeping the momentum going. And of course, being patient with yourself. Progress might be slow at times, but every little step forward is still progress.
Exactly. And it's important to celebrate those small wins too. If you notice you're getting better at something, even if it's just a little bit, give yourself credit for it. It keeps you motivated and positive.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think it's also important to enjoy the process. Speaking practice doesn't have to be a chore. Find ways to make it fun and engaging, and it'll be something you look forward to rather than something you dread.
That's such a good point. The more you enjoy it, the more you'll want to do it. And that's when the real progress happens, when it feels less like work and more like a natural part of your day.
Exactly. So, to recap for our listeners, talk to yourself, record and listen to your own speech, read aloud, shadow native speakers, practice in front of a mirror, create a practice environment, and involve a friend or family member. And most importantly, be consistent and have fun with it.
Absolutely. And remember, everyone's journey is different. What works for one person might not work for another. So it's all about finding what works best for you and sticking with it. You know, Alex, as we were wrapping up, something else came to mind. We didn't talk much about the emotional side of speaking practice, like how to deal with the anxiety or fear that often comes with speaking, especially in front of others. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, definitely. I think fear and anxiety are something everyone deals with at some point. For me, it used to be a big hurdle. I'd get so nervous before speaking in public or even in a group setting. My heart would race, my palms would get sweaty, and I'd just freeze up. It took a lot of time and practice to get over that.
I can totally relate. I used to get nervous even when speaking to just one person, especially if it was someone I didn't know well. It's like all the words I wanted to say would just vanish from my mind.
Exactly. It's like your brain goes into overdrive, and suddenly everything feels 10 times harder. But over time, I realized that a lot of that fear comes from worrying about what other people think.
That's so true. The fear of judgment is huge. You start thinking about every possible way you could mess up or sound silly, and it just spirals from there.
Right, but something that really helped me was changing my mindset. I started focusing more on the message I wanted to convey rather than on how I was coming across. It's like shifting the attention from yourself to the content of what you're saying.
That's a great strategy. I think when you're passionate about what you're talking about, it naturally becomes easier to focus on the message rather than on your nerves.
Exactly. And another thing that helped was accepting that it's okay to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, and most people aren't judging you as harshly as you might think. They're usually just happy to listen to what you have to say.
That's so true. I think we're often our own worst critics. Once I started to embrace that mindset, where it's okay to stumble or forget a word, it really took a lot of the pressure off.
Definitely. And on a practical level, I found that preparing thoroughly before speaking helps a lot too. It doesn't mean you have to memorize every word, but just having a clear outline of your key points can make a huge difference.
Oh, for sure. Having a structure to fall back on can really boost your confidence. And sometimes, even if you do forget something, you can quickly recover because you know the general direction you're heading in.
Exactly. And speaking of structure, another technique I've used is visualization. Before I have to speak, especially if it's something big like a presentation, I take a few minutes to close my eyes and visualize myself speaking confidently. I imagine the audience being engaged and everything going smoothly. It really helps set a positive tone.
I love that. Visualization is such a powerful tool. I've used it before too, not just for speaking, but for any situation where I feel nervous. It's like your brain gets a practice run before the real thing.
Yes, that's exactly it. And it's amazing how much calmer and more prepared you can feel after visualizing a successful outcome. It's like you've already done it once, so the real thing isn't as scary.
Definitely. And another thing that's helped me manage anxiety is breathing exercises. Just taking a few deep breaths before speaking can really help calm your nerves and clear your mind.
Oh, absolutely. Deep breathing is such a simple but effective way to relax. I like to do a quick breathing exercise before I start speaking, especially if I'm feeling particularly nervous. It's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Just a few slow, deep breaths in and out can make a big difference. It helps you get centered and focused.
Totally. And if you combine that with positive self-talk, it can really boost your confidence. Instead of letting negative thoughts take over, I try to remind myself of past successes, or just tell myself that I'm capable and prepared.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Positive self-talk is huge. I've found that when I consciously replace negative thoughts with positive ones, it completely changes my attitude. It's like giving yourself a little pep talk.
Exactly. It's amazing how powerful our thoughts are. Just telling yourself, I can do this, or I've got this, can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's about finding what works for you personally. For some people, it might be a specific routine or a mantra they repeat before speaking. For others, it might be wearing something that makes them feel confident or even having a lucky charm.
That's so true. I have this one jacket I always wear when I'm about to give a big presentation. It's like my power jacket, and just putting it on makes me feel more confident.
I love that. It's amazing how something as simple as a piece of clothing can give you that extra boost. For me, it's this necklace my grandmother gave me. I wear it whenever I need to feel strong and grounded.
That's beautiful, Sarah. It's all about those little things that make you feel empowered. And I think having those rituals or habits can really help turn speaking from something stressful into something that feels more comfortable and even enjoyable.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that everyone has their own way of coping with nerves. What works for one person might not work for another. And that's okay. It's all about finding what makes you feel the most at ease.
Definitely. And as we keep practicing and trying different things, we get better at managing those nerves. It's all part of the journey.
For sure. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that nerves aren't always a bad thing. A little bit of nervous energy can actually be a good thing. It means you care about what you're saying, and it can give you that extra edge of focus and enthusiasm.
That's a great point, Sarah. It's all about channeling that energy in a positive way. Instead of letting it overwhelm you, you can use it to enhance your performance.
Exactly. And over time, as you get more comfortable with speaking, those nerves often become easier to manage. It's all about building that confidence through practice and experience.
100%. And speaking of confidence, something that really helped me was learning to embrace my own speaking style. For the longest time, I tried to mimic other speakers I admired, but it never felt quite right.
Oh, I know what you mean. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking you have to sound like someone else to be a good speaker. But really, the most powerful speeches or conversations come from people who are authentic and true to themselves.
Exactly. When I finally started embracing my own voice and style, I felt so much more at ease. I realized that I didn't have to be perfect or sound like someone else. I just had to be myself.
That's such a valuable lesson. Authenticity is so important in communication. When you're true to yourself, your message comes across as more genuine, and people are more likely to connect with you.
Definitely, and I think it's something that comes with time and experience. The more you practice and get comfortable with your own style, the more confident you become.
Absolutely. And it's also about recognizing that your style might be different depending on the situation. You might speak differently in a casual conversation than you would in a formal presentation, and that's perfectly okay.
Exactly. It's all about being adaptable while still staying true to yourself. And as you gain more experience, you'll naturally develop that flexibility.
For sure. And it's also important to remember that everyone's journey is different. Some people might take longer to find their voice, and that's okay. It's all about being patient with yourself and enjoying the process.
Absolutely. And speaking of enjoying the process, something that's really helped me is celebrating the small victories along the way. Whether it's successfully giving a presentation, having a great conversation, or just feeling more confident in your speaking skills, it's important to acknowledge those achievements.
I couldn't agree more. Celebrating the small wins is so important. It keeps you motivated and reminds you that you're making progress, even if it's not always immediately visible.
Exactly, and it's those small wins that add up over time and lead to bigger successes. So, it's important to give yourself credit for the effort you're putting in.
Definitely. And on that note, I think it's also important to surround yourself with supportive people who encourage you and celebrate your progress with you. Having a strong support system can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Whether it's friends, family, or even a speaking group, having people who believe in you and cheer you on can be incredibly motivating.
For sure. And sometimes, just knowing that someone else believes in you can give you that extra boost of confidence you need to keep going.
Definitely. And I think that's why it's so important to also be that supportive person for others. When you see someone else working on their speaking skills, offer them encouragement and positive feedback. It can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to lift each other up and support one another on this journey.
100%. It's all about creating a positive, supportive environment where everyone feels empowered to grow and improve.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect note to end on for today. It's been such a great conversation, Alex. I hope our listeners find these tips and insights helpful as they continue on their own speaking journeys.
Same here, Sarah. It's always a pleasure chatting with you and sharing our experiences. And to our listeners, remember to keep practicing, stay positive, and most importantly, be kind to yourselves as you work on your speaking skills.
You know, Alex, one thing we touched on earlier that I think deserves a bit more attention is how speaking practice can be a powerful tool for personal growth, not just in terms of improving your communication skills, but also in how it can help you grow as a person.
That's such a great point, Sarah. When I first started working on my speaking skills, I thought it was just about getting better at talking. But over time, I realized that it's also about developing confidence, resilience, and even self-awareness.
Exactly. It's like speaking practice is a mirror that reflects back at you, your strengths, your insecurities, and everything in between. As you work on your speaking skills, you start to learn a lot about yourself, which can be really empowering.
Definitely. And I think one of the most valuable things I've learned is how to embrace vulnerability. Speaking, especially in front of others, can make you feel exposed, but there's so much growth that comes from stepping out of your comfort zone and allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
That's so true. When you're willing to be vulnerable, you open yourself up to new experiences and opportunities. It's not always easy, but it's such an important part of growth. Have you ever had a moment where you really had to push through that vulnerability?
Oh, definitely. I remember this one time when I had to give a speech at a family event. It was a big deal because I'm not usually the one to take the spotlight in front of my entire extended family. I was really nervous and kept thinking about all the ways I could mess up. But I realized that this was a chance to show up as my true self, flaws and all. So I took a deep breath, embraced the nerves, and just went for it.
Wow, that sounds intense. How did it go?
Surprisingly well. I stumbled a bit here and there, but afterward, people came up to me and told me how much they appreciated what I said. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine, and I think that's what mattered most. It was a real turning point for me in terms of embracing vulnerability and using it as a strength.
That's amazing, Alex. I love how you turned what could have been a really stressful situation into a positive experience. I think that's a big part of personal growth, learning to see challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles.
Exactly, and I think speaking practice really teaches you that. It's not just about mastering a skill, it's about learning how to handle pressure, how to connect with others, and how to be comfortable with who you are.
Absolutely. And speaking of connecting with others, I think one of the most rewarding aspects of improving your speaking skills is how it enhances your relationships. When you can communicate more clearly and confidently, it really deepens your connections with the people around you.
For sure. Good communication is at the heart of any strong relationship, whether it's with friends, family, or even colleagues. When you can express yourself well, it helps prevent misunderstandings and builds trust.
Exactly. And it's not just about talking. Listening is such a huge part of effective communication, too. When you're practicing your speaking skills, you're also learning how to listen better, which is just as important.
That's a great point, Sarah. Active listening is something I've really had to work on. It's so easy to get caught up in thinking about what you're going to say next. But when you take the time to really listen to the other person, the conversation becomes so much richer.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because practicing your speaking skills can actually help you become a better listener. When you're more confident in your ability to express yourself, you're less likely to feel the need to jump in or interrupt, which allows you to focus more on what the other person is saying.
Exactly. It's like a positive feedback loop. The better you get at speaking, the better you get at listening, and vice versa. And that really deepens your connections with others, which is so valuable.
Definitely. And it's also about empathy, right? When you're speaking, especially in a conversation, it's important to be mindful of how the other person is feeling and what they might be thinking. It's not just about getting your point across, it's about creating a space where both people feel heard and understood.
That's so true, Sarah. Empathy is such a key part of communication. When you can put yourself in the other person's shoes and really understand their perspective, it makes the conversation much more meaningful.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that develops naturally as you work on your speaking skills. You become more attuned to the dynamics of conversation and more aware of how your words affect others.
Definitely. And I think that awareness extends beyond just speaking. It's something that seeps into other areas of your life as well. You start to become more mindful in general, whether it's in how you interact with others, how you approach challenges, or even how you think about yourself.
For sure. Speaking practice is like a gateway to so many other aspects of personal growth. It's about more than just words. It's about building confidence, fostering empathy, and developing a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you.
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes it such a rewarding journey. It's not just about becoming a better speaker, it's about becoming a better version of yourself.
Exactly. And that's something we should all strive for, right? To keep growing, learning, and becoming more of who we want to be.
Definitely. And it's a journey that never really ends. There's always more to learn and more ways to improve, both in terms of speaking and in life in general.
Absolutely. And it's important to enjoy the journey, not just focus on the destination. The process of learning and growing is just as valuable as the end result.
For sure. And I think that's a great mindset to have in all areas of life, not just in speaking. When you're focused on the journey, it takes the pressure off and allows you to appreciate the small victories along the way.
Exactly. And it makes the whole experience more fulfilling. When you're enjoying the process, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like an adventure.
That's a perfect way to put it, Sarah. Speaking practice really is an adventure, with all the ups and downs that come with it. But it's an adventure that's definitely worth taking.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who might be just starting out on their speaking journey or maybe struggling with it, we just want to say, keep going. It might be challenging at times, but every step you take is bringing you closer to your goals.
100%, and remember, you don't have to do it alone. Whether it's finding a practice partner, seeking feedback from others, or just listening to conversations like this one, there are so many ways to support yourself along the way.
Exactly. And don't forget to be kind to yourself. It's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to feel nervous, and it's okay to take things one step at a time. The most important thing is that you keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, Sarah. It's been such a great conversation, and I hope our listeners have found it as helpful and inspiring as I have.
Same here, Alex. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and share these insights. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today. We're rooting for you as you continue on your speaking journey. You know, Alex, as we've been talking, something else popped into my head that I think is really important to address. How speaking practice isn't just about the mechanics of speaking or even just personal growth, it's also about finding your voice. And in a broader sense, finding your place in the world. Have you ever thought about it that way?
That's such an interesting perspective, Sarah. I think you're absolutely right. Finding your voice is such a big part of speaking practice, but it's also a part of finding your identity, your beliefs, and how you want to present yourself to the world. It's like speaking becomes a way of discovering who you are.
Exactly. And it's so much more than just the literal act of speaking. It's about expressing your thoughts, your values, and your personality. It's about figuring out what you stand for and how you want to contribute to the conversations happening around you.
Yes, and that's where it gets really powerful. Because when you find your voice, you start to realize that what you have to say matters. You start to see that your perspective is valuable, and that gives you the confidence to speak up, not just in formal settings, but in everyday life.
Absolutely. And I think that's something everyone can relate to, no matter where they are on their speaking journey. Whether you're just starting out or you've been working on your speaking skills for years, there's always that element of self-discovery and self-expression.
Definitely. And it's a continuous process. Your voice and the way you express it can evolve over time as you grow and as your experiences shape you. What you believe in, how you see the world, and how you want to communicate those beliefs. These things can change, and that's okay. It's all part of the journey.
That's such a good point, Alex. Our voice isn't something that's fixed. It's something that evolves with us. And I think that's really empowering because it means we're not stuck in one place. We can grow, change, and adapt. And our voice can grow, change, and adapt with us.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about speaking practice. It gives you the tools to navigate those changes. As you become more comfortable with speaking, you also become more comfortable with the idea of change and with the idea that your voice can develop over time.
Yes, and it also helps you to be more resilient. When you know how to express yourself and you've built up that confidence, you're better equipped to handle challenges or pushbacks. You're not as easily shaken when you face opposition because you're secure in your ability to communicate your perspective.
Absolutely, and that resilience is so important, not just in speaking, but in life. We're all going to face situations where we need to stand up for ourselves or for what we believe in, and having a strong, confident voice makes all the difference.
It really does. And I think it's important to remember that finding your voice isn't always about being loud or dominant in a conversation. Sometimes it's about being thoughtful and measured. It's about knowing when to speak up and when to listen.
That's such a great point. Finding your voice doesn't mean you have to be the loudest person in the room. It's more about being authentic and true to yourself. Whether that means speaking up when something matters to you or listening when someone else needs to be heard.
Exactly. It's about balance. And that balance can be tricky to find, especially when you're first starting out. I remember when I was younger, I used to think that to be heard, I had to be loud or assertive all the time. But over time, I realized that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that listens first and speaks with intention.
Yes, that's such an important realization. And I think that's something we all learn as we go along. There's a time to speak up and a time to step back. And both are equally valuable in different situations.
Absolutely. And speaking of balance, I think it's also important to talk about how speaking practice can help us find balance in other areas of our lives. Like how it can help us manage stress, build better relationships, and even achieve our goals.
Definitely. It's amazing how something as simple as practicing your speaking skills can have such a wide-reaching impact. For example, managing stress. When you're confident in your ability to communicate, a lot of situations that might have been stressful before become more manageable.
Exactly. I used to get really stressed out before meetings or social events because I wasn't sure how I'd come across or if I'd be able to express myself clearly. But as I worked on my speaking skills, that stress started to fade. I realized that even if things didn't go perfectly, I had the tools to handle whatever came up.
That's such a good feeling, isn't it? Knowing that you're capable of handling a situation, even if it's challenging. It's like a weight is lifted off your shoulders.
Absolutely. And I think that confidence spills over into other areas of life too. When you know you can communicate effectively, you start to feel more confident in pursuing your goals, whether that's in your career, your personal life, or even in creative projects.
Definitely. Speaking practice can be a real confidence booster in that way. When you're not held back by fear of speaking or expressing yourself, you're more willing to take risks and go after what you want.
Exactly. And that's such an important part of achieving your goals, being willing to put yourself out there, to take those risks, and to advocate for yourself. It's hard to do that if you're not confident in your voice.
100%. And it's not just about big, bold moves either. Sometimes it's the small, everyday moments that matter most, like asking for what you need, setting boundaries, or simply expressing gratitude. These are all ways that we use our voice to shape our lives and our relationships.
Absolutely. It's the little things that add up over time, and speaking practice helps you become more aware of those moments and more intentional in how you use your voice.
For sure. And I think it also helps you become more compassionate, both towards yourself and others. When you've worked on your own speaking skills, you understand how challenging it can be, and that makes you more empathetic when others are struggling.
That's such a good point. I've definitely found that to be true in my own experience. When you know how hard it is to find your voice, you're more likely to be patient and supportive when someone else is trying to do the same.
Exactly. And that compassion can really strengthen your relationships. When you're more understanding and empathetic, it creates a space where others feel safe to express themselves, which deepens the connection.
Absolutely. And it goes both ways. When you feel confident in your own voice, you're also more open to hearing what others have to say. It creates a more balanced, respectful dynamic in your relationships.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things about working on your speaking skills. It not only benefits you, but it also has a positive impact on the people around you.
For sure. It's like a ripple effect. When you're confident and compassionate in your communication, it encourages others to be the same. It creates a more positive, supportive environment for everyone.
Absolutely. And that's something we can all strive for, whether we're at home, at work, or anywhere else. It's about creating a culture of open, honest, and respectful communication.
Exactly. And that's something that takes time and effort, but it's so worth it. When we invest in our speaking skills, we're investing in ourselves and in our relationships.
100%. And I think that's a great takeaway for today's conversation. Speaking practice is about so much more than just talking. It's about finding your voice, building confidence, fostering empathy, and creating positive connections with the people around you.
Absolutely. And it's a journey that we can all embark on, no matter where we are right now. There's always room to grow, and every step forward is progress.
Definitely. So, to our listeners, wherever you are on your speaking journey, keep going. Keep practicing, keep growing. And most importantly, keep using your voice. It matters more than you might realize.
Exactly. Your voice is unique and valuable, and the world needs to hear it. So, don't be afraid to speak up and share your perspective.
Well said, Sarah. I think that's a perfect note to end on for today. It's been another great conversation, and I hope it's been as inspiring for our listeners as it has been for me.
Same here, Alex. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and dive into these topics. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today. We hope you've found some useful insights and that you feel motivated to continue on your speaking journey.
Absolutely. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and remember, you've got this. Until next time, take care and keep using your voice.
Take care, everyone. See you next time.